In part 2 of this recap, I'll be telling the continuation of when the captain betrayed Jim, the prisoners, and guards by blowing up the helipad, the tremendous anger Jim feels towards these strange monsters that only eat sig, and what happens to Marnie, who's pregnant with what may be Jim's child. My name is IWD Recaps. Jim and Marnie met at a young age on a space shuttle on its way to Coldfoot. Ed made Marnie cry when Jim came over and showed her a drawing, which made them both laugh, becoming friends ever since. Jim wakes up and he has a beam stuck on top of him. The effect of the missile the captain shot is dead bodies and rubble. Walter's there to help Jim get out. He uses a beam for leverage to get him unstuck, while Jim scanters away when a monster emerges from the rubble. It ignores Walter and goes after an exoskeleton as well as Jim. Walter grabs a flare gun and shoots it in the monster's mouth, and it explodes. After its death, Jim realizes that these monsters eat sig ore and are drawn to it. A sentry falls from the rubble, still intact, and Jim activates it. They look at a map and decide to go to the first floor, but first they loot some supplies from the dead bodies around. Walter loots guns and Jim loots underwear. Damn it, Jim. You should have looted some panties. Trust me, they're way more comfortable. They also loot the prison cells for extra sig and find a truck on the first floor. Jim's angry. Those monsters killed and destroyed everything, and it's time for a little payback. Walter drops him at an excavator, and using it, he grinds a few of those monsters into bits of flesh, combined with stones and explosions that get blown up and shredded away. Jim salutes to a drawing of his boss and the short MILF in honor and pride. He gets back in the truck, and they make a quick getaway. The gas the monsters emit is flammable, which explains why one blew up when Walter shot it with a flare gun. Jim heads back home, to the dust box, to fetch his family. Walter says he'll wait for them until they get his grandpa Ed, Marnie, and the others. He's willing since he owes a personal debt to Jim. As they arrive at the dust box, they're met with monsters, hundreds of them, with the army fighting against them. The citizens of the dust box are evacuating. Walter lands their truck and he tells he'll wait for him and his family. Jim runs off to their apartment, and along the way he sees an injured man crawling on the floor. Jim helps him to get to the escort ships. When one of the soldiers tell they need him to help somewhere, he tells he's not a soldier and he's looking for his family. The soldier questions him and Jim shouts, saying there are people dying and he's wasting time. Jim runs off and gets to their apartment. He sees no one, so he goes next door, looking for Marnie, but instead find her little brother and sister dead, still holding the picture he drew them this morning. He picks up a knife and finds his grandpa Ed in the process of being eaten by a monster. Inside the monster's stomach, Jim sees Marnie's mother, with the horrified look of her death carved onto her face, and the stench of a shit stain in her pants engulfing the room. The monster picks up Ed, as Jim looks over and sees the pregnant Marnie. Watching horrified, Jim pulls head and detaches him from his mechanical legs. The monster goes after Jim, and the legless Ed grabs a knife Jim had from the floor and stabs the monster's tongue. The monster smashes Ed around and breaks the room in the process, resulting in it and Ed hanging before their death. Ed says goodbye opposed to Jim, takes off his gas mask, and stabs the monster. It falls and drags Ed to an explosive grave. Moments after, the captain walks in with some troops acting like he didn't launch a missile at Jim and blow shit the fuck up. The captain orders Jim to move out, and he denies that order. The captain and troops treat him as a deserter and aim their weapons.
The Chinese army has small explosives inside of their helmets. The explosives are implanted in all soldiers' helmets, and the detonator is given to the lieutenant, captain, or high-ranking officer on scene. This is to prevent desertion. You try and run while in the middle of a battle, your brains go splat.
A doctor shows up and stops the captain. Dr. Hansen points out Marnie, who's pregnant. Firing their guns at a pregnant lady would be a double kill, which is probably not okay. Jim and Marnie start crying, mourning the loss of whoever the fuck just died. I completely forgot. Marnie asks, what's the point of living if everyone dies?
Marnie, you have to live for the baby.
Fuck the baby, I never wanted this shit.
Marnie,
Marnie, stop!
No, Jim! All I wanted was some big old dick, nothing, baby!
Marnie!
I didn't want this, I was sorry, Jim, I was sorry!
Turns out the baby is not Jim's, but instead Marnie is a surrogate. Jim picks her up and they all decide to move out. The dust box is crumbling from all the explosions from the monsters. With Jim carrying Marnie, they run away from the cracking and falling floors and walls behind them. One of the soldiers falls while carrying the doctor that stopped the captain from shooting Jim, Dr. Hansen. While the rest get on the truck Walter's driving, Jim jumps out of the truck, leaving Marnie to help the soldier and Dr. Hansen. His sentry follows him and they all get on it. Jim tells the sentry to jump, but unfortunately it's not enough to make it. When suddenly, while faced with the threat of death, the sentry gains artificial intelligence and launches a rope that the troops on the truck can grab a hold of. Safe and sound, the soldier Jim came back for thanks him and they enter a ship, but not before the captain glares at Jim with a distaste for not obeying his orders. One more look at the crumbling dust box as it explodes and the ship flies away. Jim brings Marnie a coat and thanks the AI sentry for its help and names it Casper. Walter hacks into the captain's data using Casper. They do some digging and find out that digging teams found the monster's eggs about a month ago, and the monster's characteristics. When the monster's bodies are damaged enough, they explode. The lead scientist that examined the monsters is William Boyd. The army is preparing evacuation shuttles to send survivors to a large tanker in orbit. Dr. Hansen and her friend Robert come to examine Marnie. They lift up a coat and jacket to block the view. Robert admires Jim's bravery. Most men would never do what he did, saving the doctor and taking care of Marnie and the baby, even though it isn't his. Shit, I could never do that. Marnie asks Jim to draw her while she's pregnant, but he has to pee, so maybe later. Along the way to the toilet, he's met with soldiers who admire his bravery and courageous nature. He gets to the bathroom and is met by the captain, behind him with his punk ass. This was the first 4 out of 8 episodes. If you wish to see part 3 of this recap, subscribe and comment your thoughts down below. Subscribing may seem like a small thing, but it really helps me out, so consider doing it for more of my content. My name is IWD Recaps. Peace out.